Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. For this week's episode, I catch up with two prominent and successful anglers in the south of the country to find out how their 2020 season went. Jason Nash is based on the Bandon with occasional forays for bass, while James Barry fishes the Copper Coast with salmon fishing also on the Suir. They are both also fishery scientists and are immersed in fly fishing with hugely successful catches throughout the year. But reading the conditions, timing it right and putting in the hours are all important, as they explained to me. And I started by asking James whether his preference was for bass or salmon.
I suppose I grew up on the River Suir. Trout and salmon were what I did. I kind of moved, I suppose migrated to the coast in my early 20s, became a bit bass obsessed. It was all kind of light lure stuff to start. Then we got into throwing flies at bass, and yeah. So when it comes to a preference, I don't really have one. I kind of mix them as best I can. Salmon fishing can drive the best of us mad at times, so it's always nice to be able to take a trip to the coast to kind of decompress, catch some fish, and then maybe go back to the salmon again. But I tend to mix it up. It's usually either bass or salmon, but yeah, I love both of them.
I think as well, speaking to more and more salmon anglers, they seem to be migrating to the coast during the summer to have a better chance of bending the rod, would you say?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When I suppose my first trip to the coast came back nearly 20 years ago now, I suppose. But I was fishing on the shore, and it was a very quiet September, and this is when we were allowed to spin and worm fish, and even on those methods, it was just really, really slow. And I remember I got gifted a sea fishing book, and there was a mention of bass fishing on the south coast of Ireland in particular, and that kind of grabbed my attention and started reading a bit more about it. And I read that these bass are great fun on lure rods and bait rods. So I actually went and explored that, and that's how I got into the bass fishing. Basically, the salmon fishing was really slow, so I went out and to see what I could find on the coast, and that's how the story with bass kind of started for me. Anyway, it was kind of slow fishing on the river brought me to the coast, so I suppose it can do that for people.
And do you base it then according to the conditions for where you're going to go fishing?
Yeah, we try to mix and match as best we can. I mean, we're heavily dictated by water levels on the shore. From the middle of August, we had like 2 or 3 big floods on the back of those storms that came through, and we just couldn't get to the river because it was just too high. So we were kind of constantly keeping an eye on the water levels to get back down to kind of fly fishable level. So in the meantime, while most other fly fishers were off the river, there were some nice tides for the bass. So we just shifted to the coast and put our attention there. So there's always something to be doing. But yeah, we tend to mix and match between them, and we keep an eye on the spring tides and bits and pieces like that. But of course, the spring tides can help the salmon fishing as well.
And how long will you keep fishing in the southeast for, James?
Yeah, so I often say that October, November are two of my favorite months, particularly on the Copper Coast. The rock fishing can really light up at that time of the year. If we get kind of settled, calm spells of weather, the bait fish will move right up onto the rocks. We get a lot of herring sprat and things like that on the south coast this time of the year. So I mean, the fishing can be electric when you get yourself into the right place at the right time. But that's the name of the game when it comes to bass fishing. And it's just you cover ground. You're trying to look for any sort of signs to find the fish, and when you do, it really can be electric this time of the year. And as everyone knows, this is when the bigger fish do tend to turn up on our coast.
And you'd still be catching this November?
Yeah, we caught him right up into the Christmas holidays last year.
No way.
So yeah, we were taking breaks in between of running down to some of the kind of the estuary marks where you'll still find fish right up until Christmas. If you have the mild kind of settled weather, the fish will be there. And I mean, some of the kind of tagging studies have shown that the bass will actually stay resident in some of our estuaries and kind of saltwater lagoons over winter. So you always have a chance when it's bass.
And does it have to stay mild, James?
It can get quite cold. There'll be mornings there where we're scraping frost off the windows and we're going out to go bass fishing on the rocks. So if it's more from kind of an angler's point of view of how pleasant it is to fish. the fish will be okay. They'll kind of mosey about, and if the temperature is drops, the fish will just slow down moving. But it'll be just a matter of trying to cover the water to find them.
And that's more likely than at that time of the year. That's when you get the lunkers, isn't it?
Yeah, generally speaking, it's when you see the bigger fish turn up. Like, I mean, already I've heard reports come in the last week or so of kind of multiple fish over the 70 centimeter mark, and quite a few fish over the magic 75 centimeters. So that's kind of 10 pound plus, which is great to see. So as the salmon season finishes, thoughts are already firmly fixed onto the coast of where we're going to go and try to get some bass.
And would you take both the fly and lure rod with you? Like, how do you determine what you're going to go with?
Yeah, good question. I started bait fishing, then I got into the lure fishing, and then in my kind of early 20s there was an explosion in kind of light lure fishing for bass. It seemed like everybody was doing it, and we kind of I suppose to a certain extent jumped on that bandwagon. We lure fished morning, noon, and night. It was your early 20s where you've nothing but time really, and we made the most of that, and we fished all along the Copper Coast. We ventured to Cork, we ventured to Wexford, and you really get to learn a mark by lure fishing. You get to learn when the fish turn up, what time, and tides and things like that. You cover so much more water with the lure rod, and I suppose if you're starting, it's a great way to get to know your venue when the fish might turn up. I suppose from the lure fishing, we were catching good numbers of fish, and I was always aware that fly fishing was there. It was a thing that people did for bass, and I suppose my background was fly fishing for trout and salmon on the shore. So, I ended up picking up a fly rod and giving it a go. And I knew, I suppose, from my lure fishing that we had kind of good rock marks, which were, close. The bass moved in quite close, so there was good kind of opportunity to target them on the fly. And that's where it started it kind of started me bringing a fly rod with me when I was lure fishing. To now I currently bring 2 fly rods and no lure rod. It's kind of one of those things now. The more I caught on the fly, the more I wanted to catch on the fly, and it's now kind of taking over a bit. And I'll throw a fly into all sorts of weather at the moment. But if the wind does get up, it's sometimes just not practical to throw a fly. And if the guys are going out and we're, if the wind is up, I'll happily throw a lure to a bass nowadays. It's still great fun.
No, definitely. That's good advice for people to cover more water with the lure rod. But I suppose with your experience and knowledge of the conditions where you fish, you're confident in bringing the fly rod when you go out.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we have kind of locations and rock marks where we know if we're standing on rocks and the fish don't turn up within the first hour of the ebb, then it's highly unlikely it's going to happen on that rock mark at that particular tide. For whatever reason, the fish just might have moved offshore. But we have it pretty dialed on some of the rock marks of when these fish will turn up. And I mean, it's great when it all comes together. But again, it's still fishing at the end of the day. So there's a lot of times where they don't turn up and they don't play ball. But yeah, definitely a lure fishing rod will increase that learning curve so much, and help a lot.
It's funny. I find I much prefer to bring the fly rod now with me. My chances of catching might be lower, but I do find I sometimes switch off and I'm just going through the motions when I'm spinning, whereas I'd much rather be casting with a fly rod, and I'm much more tuned into what I'm doing then.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% agreement with you there. I think from a fly fishing perspective, it just fully engages you, because you got, when it comes to even line management or making sure your retrieve is okay, your running line's going into the stripping basket, there's waves coming, you're trying to control the fly line, that sort of stuff. You can get away to a certain degree with that with your lure fishing. But I mean, if you're not switched on when you're throwing throwing a clouser over your head, and that's one way to make sure you're fully engaged in doing something. When there's this kind of lead-eyed fly going past your ear. But yeah, no, it's a great way of catching them.
We were talking about the frustrations of fishing, but do you also think, though, like the danger with social media, great as it is, that there's a danger of people only seeing the good days and not recognizing or realizing that there are many blank days to it as well?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The dreaded social media, because there's no shortage of, if you go onto Instagram or Facebook, you'll scroll through your feed, and someone in there will have a picture of a big bass or a big salmon that you're convincing yourself you're doing something wrong. But absolutely, I always post when we're out fishing, and if it's a slow day, I'll happily throw up a picture of one of the guys casting, or a sunset picture or sunrise picture, just to show it's not all about catching the fish and posting those big glory shots and grip and grins. But I know that my feed might have a lot of fish pictures at the moment. That's purely just a result of the good fishing. But
Yeah, and for even more experienced anglers and guys, there are the blank days, and we all have to put in the hard yards.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, for example, the last 4 times I've been bass fishing, I think there was 3 blanks. So there's always that sort of stuff. And I mean, we were on a trip to West Cork for 4 days. I think it was on the last set of good tides, and you go onto social media, probably think we had a great trip, but in all honesty, we fished 15-hour days. There was mainly kind of the odd schoolie here and there. There was fish caught, but it was tough. You still have to put in the hours and cover the water, and try your best to find the fish.
Yep, exactly. Well, I'm also joined now by Jason Nash from the Bandon River, and Jason, it seems to have been a better season than in years gone by.
Yeah. Like there's many different reasons or many different theories would say as to why there was a better run this year. Thankfully on the Bandon we enjoyed a better run for sure. Now I suppose a lot of it is down to better marine survival. I mean the quantity of fish was there, but also the quality of the fish was it was excellent altogether. And compared to other seasons there now. A lot of the grills they were kind of averaging 5 to 7 pounds, which is really nice to see. We had a very, very good run in July. August was also very good, with fresh fish coming in on a consistent basis. Unfortunately, June it was hard to assess because a lot of people were still kind of getting back into fishing after the lockdown and COVID. So it was a little bit harder to assess in the earlier months. But July and August, I think a lot of fishermen were very, very happy with the returns into the river. And thankfully, the conditions for fishing were also perfect for the vast majority of it. We had very, very good water levels in comparison to the last couple of years when we would have been faced with a drought more often than not. So that all contributed to better returns and better fishing as well.
Well, what's the best time of year for runs on the Bandon?
The last few seasons now, May and June can be very, very good for late running spring fish or earlier summer salmon. And that's the time of year when you can expect to get the better quality of fish. July, numbers wise, would be the best month. August can be as well, but just for fresh fish. July, you've got a guaranteed good run of fresh fish in July. It begins to taper off after the first or second week of August. September, then you'll still catch salmon, but a lot of them will be stale. A lot of them will be in the river for quite some time, and that seems to be a kind of common theme, really, nationwide and over the UK as well. It's just the back end run that we used to enjoy 10 years ago. It really has dwindled to nothing. You're nearly as likely to get a fresh fish now in February, March as you are in September. It's just really has got down to that level. It's hard to kind of fathom sometimes when you think back to the days in 2010 when you used to have a very, very strong run of fresh fish in September and even going to October, November. And that just isn't the case anymore.
Is it cyclical, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. Like when you think back to 2009, 2010 on the Bandon at least, I suppose it's all river specific, but on the Bandon at least there used to be a huge run in September, October, November. And it only got stronger and stronger coming up to 2009, 2010, and then it really just seemed to flip. It just seemed to turn around, and we just didn't get those quantities of fish coming in anymore. But it really happened very fast. It didn't just numbers didn't dwindle slowly. It didn't reduce slowly. It just really seemed to flick like a switch, and that was it. And it seemed to happen nationwide and over in the UK as well. But we have seen marginally better spring runs in the later spring. I'm talking now about April and May. Yet to be seen summer times how much the run has improved. It's steady, I would say. Some years you'll have a little less of a run. Other years, like this year now, it's you've got a better run. But there's nothing too dramatic in the decline. It seems to be more. It's steady, just steady runs at the moment, thankfully.
Jason, tell us, how was the season of the River Suir?
Yeah, so the Suir this year was it was an interesting season given all the circumstances. I mean, our spring fishing never really got up and running due to just not being able to get to the river. So we were kind of May and June by the time we got onto fish, and the fishing was okay at the start. It was actually looking back, it was quite slow this year at the beginning and in the opening months. And then the fish began to appear in July and August, pretty similar to what Jason saw in the Bandon. And then September, which is in the past few years has usually been a quieter month for us on the section river where I fish downstream. It was actually quite good. We had really nice favourable water levels, and the back end fishing which we had was really nice and consistent. And I mean, some of these autumn salmon that we got were really impressive. With our big kipes, which was really cool and good fishing, yeah.
On what stretch of the Suir are you fishing? It's down by Carrick and Suir, is it?
That's it, yeah. So my local club that I fish on is the Carrick and Suir Angling Club. Yeah, so we have about 2 or 3 kilometers above the head of tide. That's kind of classic pool, riffle, glide type water. Pretty much every inch of it is fly fishable. It's quite a large river, I suppose, in places, maybe 30 to 50 meters wide in places, and nice deep pockets of water. And yeah, so we're kind of heavily dictated by water levels and kind of fly fishable levels to get in and actually fish.
Yeah, I find the Suir, it's a fascinating river, from the salmon to the incredible trout population in it, and it can also be quite a challenging river as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I probably ignore the trout more than I should. There's some absolutely fantastic trout fishing to be had, especially on our lower reaches, and I see some serious quality trout caught quite regularly by the locals there. But I suppose to a certain extent we get the salmon blinkers on, and salmon fever sets in, and all we tend to do is kind of swing flies. But from I suppose a technical point of view, the fishing can get quite tricky. It's quite a large river, so you're using kind of big rods, throwing 500 grain lines, and you have to sometimes taper out long leaders and to try to adapt to the low water and very clear water at times, as the Suir can be.
Are most of the salmon caught downstream of Clonmel? Like, that's your best chance of a fish on the river?
Yeah, I suppose maybe something I probably only hear locally from the guys that fish in Clonmel down, but I generally only hear of the fishing on the Clonmel Club waters and downstream of kind of good salmon fishing. Now, I'm sure there is places upstream where you'll still get your good salmon fishing. I'm sure in Care and Golden and places like that, but I'm sure it's probably far more patchy than it was back in the day.
And what's the best fish that's been caught in the beats that you fish, James?
Oh, I've heard of multiple 20-pound plus fish. I think the biggest that I've heard of on the club this year has probably been mid-20s. And then I think there was that fish that was reported not too long ago in the angling updates of just up around high 20s that was caught at nil. So the Suir, it has that reputation for big fish, and I suppose it definitely lived up to it this year. And some of the quality of the fish that I saw landed on the club and heard of landed on the club where I fish was just outstanding. It really is world class at times when you hear some of the weights reported of fish.
So is the Suir worth targeting at the back end of the season, do you think?
Yeah, I suppose it would be. A lot of I suppose all our September fish this year were mainly colored fish, but there was some fantastic specimen salmon caught there, and I think the Suir, along with some of those other kind of big fish rivers that you'd hear of, like the Boyne and the Slaney, would be certainly kind of those areas you'd want to go if you were chasing that big one.
Jason, what size of fish were caught in the Bandon this year?
This year there wasn't so many big fish. Usually we do have 1 or 2 20-pound fish caught. This year now, I think the biggest I would have heard of would be 16, 17 pounds. So we had some double figure fish, all right, but in the main it was mostly grills, averaging 5, 7 pounds, which were in great condition. But there was nothing huge caught this year, and there weren't too many big fish caught. Now some of that might be down to the fact that a lot of the bigger fish will run later spring, very early summer, when guys weren't fishing as much due to COVID and things. But yeah, no, there was nothing massive reported this year, unfortunately. But
And with the Bandon where it is, do you get a mix of tourists fishing the river, or is it just mainly locals?
yeah, there's a good mix. We'll say Bandon Angling Association here now, we'd have over 250 members, and we do have day and evening permits available for anybody who wants to go trout and salmon fishing. We're lucky in that a lot of the river it's very picturesque, especially west of Bandon, very unspoiled, and it is within a good distance of your major other towns for tourism like Kinsale, Clonakilty, close enough to Cork City as well. It's only 20 minutes away. And we're lucky enough that we have 8 miles of double bank fishing, and we do still get quite a few tourists coming over, and they just take their day ticket out or evening tickets. Some of them we guide as well, and it is nice to just have that balance in that the fishing is preserved for members, but we do have an allocation of permits as well, for visitors, that they can come along and enjoy it. And the fact that there's no beats as such, you're kind of really free to go where you like, really, to fish. People like that a lot, where you can just, would say, for instance, you can go up to the Desert Bridge, which would be our uppermost beat at the start of the day, and you can fish around there, and then you can work your way back towards Bandon, fishing down around Baxter's Bridge. And there's a really nice diversity of fishing that, in all those areas. So there's something kind of really that will attract a big range of fishermen, really, whether it be they're fishing for salmon or for trout.
And are you like James, where you head off to the coast looking for a bass when you can then?
Yes, now not as much so as James, but say, for instance, only about 2 weeks ago now, I'd say, was the first time I actually went for a bass now this year, and the reason being is just because the conditions in the river, it was just hard to turn your back on. Water levels were just conducive to good fishing, bar in September now, but in July and August they were just perfect. Now in the previous summers, all right, when the river is down to its bones and you just know that the fishing isn't going to be good, the bass fishing it's just an excellent option. I mean, we're spoiled down here with the coastline that we have around Cormac Sherry, Kinsale, further west at Clonakilty, Rosscarbery. There's just so much ground there and so much potential, for lure fishing, for bass and fly fishing as well. It really is a nice alternative.
And I think this year it's been a great opportunity for people to get outdoors more and appreciate nature, with fishing as part of that. And I'd be hoping we'll see a knock-on effect for 2021. Would you be the same, Jason?
Definitely. We've seen guys there now, getting back into fishing this year, that wouldn't have been in the club for a while. They've had more time with everything that's going on, and they've really, their passion for fishing has come back. And they're actually, if they've got sons or daughters as well, they've been coming fishing. And it's just great to see that added participation. So, every cloud has a silver lining, and it's nice to see that extra presence on the river and that extra enthusiasm. Because we'll say, from a juvenile angling perspective, when it comes to game fishing, it's not easy to encourage them at the moment with the way fishing has just transpired over the last number of years in the game angling world. And a situation like this has, there's an option has become available for people to be able to go out fishing in a safe, uncrowded environment. and enjoy the landscape and enjoy nature like that. And like, for all of us, we try our best not to ever take it for granted. But certainly, when you are doing it on a regular basis, you're just are liable to forget that. But as things have happened lately now, it just makes you kind of more hungry for it and more appreciative of what you have. So like we really are very, very lucky.
What about yourself, James?
Yeah, I suppose I'm kind of echoing what Jason's just said there. It's been fantastic. I've heard from 2 or 3 people now that there's been a significant kind of increase in the amount of people actively looking to get back into fly fishing, and some I suppose reconnecting with the sport. People that are involved in the tackle industries and things like that. So that was actually fantastic to hear. And I suppose if we're going to draw any positives from the pandemic, is maybe people have taken a step back and realized how nice and how valuable the resources we have on our doorstep are, and to make the most of them, because it's amazing fishery that we have around here.
No, 100%, and we should all try and get out more when we can, and hopefully things will return to some kind of normal in 2021. James and Jason, many thanks for joining me on the show. I'm hoping I'll be able to join you on the river next year with a mic and a fly rod at hand, so we'll see how that goes. And James, if people want to follow you on Instagram, your handle is Riffle to Reef.
That's the one, yeah. You'll find me on Instagram and Facebook and all those places. So yeah, just fire me a message.
And Jason, then you're Jason_Nash_fishing.
Yeah, that's the one as well. Yeah.
Well, best of luck, lads, with whatever fishing you get to do in the remaining weeks, and hopefully we'll chat again next year.
Thank you very much, Dara. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Dara.
My thanks to James, Barry and Jason Nash for joining me on the show. Certainly 2 fly anglers to keep you inspired on your off days. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and I'll be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.